Hello, Metal Crypt. This is Jani from a Finnish death metal band called CYNABARE URNE. We released our first album around 5 years ago. It's actually here. It's called Obsidian Daggers and Cinnabar Skulls. I suppose that is the reason why I got this request from Metal Crypt to list 4 most inspirational albums that I have heard. I guess I could start from the very first ones, which I heard as a 10-year-old kid or something like that. I was born in 74, so that was like early 80s. The first record that I bought was actually from Elvis Presley. That I remember. After that, I don't know, maybe some Finnish rock albums, can't remember. The first metal albums or hard rock albums that I got were probably from Wasp, Iron Maiden Killers. That's one of the albums that I still do listen to, but I can't really list it as the most inspirational album, because when it comes to writing my own music, then I guess the most inspirational albums that I heard were the albums that I heard around 1990, 1992, most likely 1991. I got my first guitar in 1980, 1989, and immediately started to write my own music, it was heavy metal, some sort of, maybe some thrash influence even there. At that point, I was already, of course, aware of bands like Metallica, Slayer, but most of the metal or hard rock that I had heard at that point were like very, very mainstream stuff. In 1991, I got into more underground stuff, and that's also when I discovered the more undergroundist bands from the 80s. And one of the most inspirational bands actually comes from the 80s, and that's definitely Celtic Frost. I could list this album as one of the most inspirational ones, but someone else just did it. So I'm gonna pick up another one. I'm gonna pick up Morbid Tales from Celtic Frost. And this is the first album, or should you call it mini album? Anyway, it's basically what Celtic Frost became after Hellhammer disbanded. And the sound is still very dark and heavy like Hellhammer was, but it's more, maybe lyrically more focused on occult stuff and stuff like that. And this whole record, it reeks of occult and darkness and heaviness. Yeah, that's probably the reason why I like it. And also, I was very fascinated by the promotional pictures here. Now you can see them. And I guess many black metal bands were too. Yeah, this you could call this band an album, an early death metal band. You could even call it black metal if the lyrics were satanic, which they are not really. They are more like occult. Their previous band Hellhammer was definitely black metal and satanic, but Celtic Frost it's more, it's wider. Also musically, I remember that these guys, they have promotional pictures from these days, and the bass player, I'm sure the guitar player Tom too, seem to like a lot of bands like Sisters of Mercy, Christian Death, Dead Can Dance, besides of heavy stuff like Black Sabbath, of course, and Venom, obviously. Yeah, those are bands that I like too, surprisingly, because I like dark music, I like heavy music, and it's not just heavy metal that I like, but also one of the genres that has inspired me a lot is gothic rock. Before CYNABARE URNE in the 19s, I used to have a band called Let Me Dream. And yeah, actually the name Let Me Dream, it was stolen from these guys. The song called Rex Iray on Into the Pandemonium album. Well, anyway, yeah, I like gothic rock. And there we come to bands like Fields of Nephilim. This is a live album called Earth Inferno. And I like it a lot because it combines the early and classic Fields of Nephilim. The first 3 albums, Dawnraiser, the Nephilim. The third one, can't remember the name of it, sorry. Elysium, of course, yes. It combines those 3 albums, and it still has that old vintage sound of Fields of Nephilim. I do like the new Fields of Nephilim as well, and also the Soon album by Nephilim. But I would say that my favorite album is definitely Earth Inferno, which is quite weird because it's a live album, but it's a really good live album. You should check it out if you haven't heard it. And yeah, from there we actually come to a band called Paradise Lost. It's a CD, and this album is called Gothic. It was released in 1991, I think. And at that point, I already knew their first album, Lost Paradise. Liked it a lot. And I also read some interviews from them. I think it was a fanzine called Isten from Finland, where there was a Paradise Lost interview. And actually, in that interview, they mentioned bands like Fields of Nephilim, The Mission, Sisters of Mercy, which basically got me into gothic rock. Obviously, I was liking death metal and heavy music already at that point. But Paradise Lost was really the band for me that managed to combine those 2 things. Actually, Celtic Frost was also doing that before them already. But Paradise Lost for me was maybe the most important band at that time, and it still is, especially those 2 albums, Lost Paradise and Gothic. I do like the later stuff too, but when it comes to really favorite albums of mine, then it's the first 2 ones. But I guess I discovered later a band who's also toying around with the theme of metal and gothic. And that's Stillborn, Necrospiritual's album. This is actually, I think this was released in 1981. 1989, of course. So it's actually older than Paradise Lost. The band probably was formed in 1985. I remember that they have some sort of demo recording from those days. And then they made this album called Necrospirituals. And then the original lineup disbanded and the sound changed a bit. But this one it's actually, I guess most of the people would say it's doom metal, but I would say that it's also one of the first gothic metal records, the way I understand the word gothic metal, which to me is a combination of metal and gothic influences. Whoa. And yeah, Stillborn is really the first band who managed to capture that. Actually, all of the 4 bands that I mentioned here are kind of capturing that feeling in their own way. Well, yeah, I'm a guy playing in a death metal band. Yeah, nowadays I was always listening to death metal, but I do also like gothic rock a lot, so I had to mention those albums. I could also mention albums like Symphonies of Sickness or Altars of Madness. But any other death metal band from the early 90s. But I guess Celtic Frost kind of sums it up. And the 3 other bands does the rest. Thank you.